Trust and Obey, page 325.
Oh, yeah, I heard you said something, but I thought you taught research.
Maybe. It is amazing though, when you stop to think about that, with these songs from Fanny Crosby, I'm amazed at every one of them, just the wealth of knowledge, and from someone who was blind, that could never see everything around, but was attuned to the important things, right?
Was she blind from birth?
I think it was early on. I think she had sight, but she went blind as I think as a teenager or somewhere around there, from what I recall. So yeah, it wasn't that she never saw, but for the majority of her life, she was blind.
Yeah, and being blind like that, it's really, like you said, special. She would be draw me nearer and nearer, precious Lord, because a lot of people would get angry.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine? I don't know what it would be like. That's hard when you lose your sight.
That's right.
Unless you've been there, you wouldn't know, but I'll say that it's got to have been hard. But she just got stronger and stronger, and she said, draw me near, precious Lord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And look what he's doing with her songs today.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, it continues on, doesn't it?
Right. And see, you even talking about it, to the church and all. And not only you, it's probably other pastors too, but I said, it's getting out about it now.
It's probably even harder too, when you think about it, for someone who probably had sight and then lost it, rather than not even experiencing it at all. But, yeah. All right, we'll take one more tonight.
306.
306. Okay. Page 306. Have thine own way, Lord. Fill with thy spirit till all shall see Christ only always living in me. A blessing. All right. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and turn it over to Brother Allen, and I appreciate Brother Allen, I really do, and can't say enough about it. And oh, you want me to? And I do want to say I really appreciate last week you did an excellent job spelling out everything during the business meeting, and I really appreciate that. So, and appreciate all he does. So turn it over there.
Not only the piano player, but he likes Alan too. That's great. I told Alan to be careful now. He's helping me.
Man, those were some great songs. My pastor these classes at church. You can go to them if you wanted to, not during church time, but during the week. And I'd go to all of them because I wanted to hear. He was a college professor also, had been for a long time, but one of the things he would say is, don't preach on a hymn. No, don't preach on a hymn. Preach the Bible. Now, you might use a hymn as an illustration, but you could use those 3 hymns right there. That's some good stuff there. A lot of theology. Anyway, we are going to go to a familiar place in the Bible. And before we go there, I'll tell you what it's about. We talked about it in Sunday school. The Jews redeemed out of Egypt. Thank you, Pastor. Redeemed out of Egypt. And they marched here and there. And they ended up right at the Promised Land in a place called Varina. And you'll remember we sent out the 12 spies. 10 of them brought back a bad report. And that's what we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what happened right after that. We know we're not going to talk about wandering 40 years. I can talk about that. We're going to talk about what they said, and then what Caleb and Joshua said, and then what God said. Most importantly, what God said, because that's who we should listen to, right? That's another thing that we do. This is not a slam on Fanny Crosby or anyone else. Whenever we use examples of anything, I think the first example ought to be Lord Jesus Christ. That's why we have such detail about him, right? And there's nothing the matter with Fanny Crosby. I talk about her all the time too. She's amazing what she's done. And there's others that are the same way. P.P. Bliss was another one, and Ira Sankey. Just amazing. One of the Wesleys, I can't remember which one, wrote a lot of music, a lot of hymns, but we can always turn to our Savior if we want a good story about good stuff and righteousness, and we should probably do it. Anyway, so that's where we are, is the spies have brought back the bad stuff, right? So this is going to be in Numbers 14. And we're going to basically stay in Numbers. There's a couple of places that I just brought part of a verse as an illustration or to strengthen something. And sometimes a whole verse somewhere. We may turn there too. You may not have to if you don't want to. But the title of this is, All the Earth Shall Be Filled. All the earth shall be filled. And that particular verse, it'll be near the end before we even get to that end of the message. But that's what attracted me to this passage again. I've talked about this passage many times over the years, but never in this particular part, this particular way. So if we see Numbers 14 starting in verse 1, and we're going to do 1 through 4, and this is called fear, 1 through 4 of chapter 14. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in the wilderness? I'd say they were upset by this, right? Driven by fear, though. Driven by fear. And wherefore hath the Lord brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, Let's make a captain and let's return to Egypt. And that's not the end of what they say. There's a little bit more that they do, but let's look at those. We had the congregation of the Jews, the whole congregation except for just a few believers, and there were believers there in what God had promised. It wasn't just those 4 men. There were others that never spoke up. I'm sure that there were not 650,000 people that all decided God was a liar when they got there, right? Maybe there were some young people and they survived that whole trip. But everybody over the age of 20 is going to die because of their decision. They're going to die anyway. They're so afraid of dying, God says, all right, you're going to die. You're not going to see the promised land. And the younger ones will. Your children that you're so worried about, they're the ones that are going to make it. Anyway, and we see that this is the fear results is a result of the spy report that was given, that there's giants in the land, and we look like grasshoppers to ourselves, and we look like grasshoppers to them. We were just tiny, and they were just giant, and we just can't make it. Even though it's a land of milk and honey. They admitted that. And what I have here, and I believe this, I think that this is a legitimate reaction. I don't say this in a blasphemous way, but whatever God says, you can still be in fear when you have to face it. And we are. I'm telling you that we have fears even though we have God's promises about issues in our lives. Because there's real things that come upon us, right? There's real things that happen to us, and we're going to react some way, and sometimes this is what we do. Are you kidding me? I'll use me. This is not to make you feel sorry for me, but I go in because I can't breathe very well, right? I've been an asthmatic all my life almost, so I go in and the doctor says, well, I don't know what's the matter with you. Go over there. And I go over there and they say, oh my goodness, I think something's the matter with you. Go over there, get it checked. And eventually, about 3 months, and they say, you got cancer, man. And I said, what? I'd already looked it up though. What do you think's the matter with you? Well, doctor, you went to college a lot more than I did, and you're trained in this. But I guessed right. And I'm going to say that there is fear that's okay to have over that. I know where I'm going on my last breath, and so do you if you're saved. If you're not saved, shame on you. You hear it every Sunday in this church, and shame on you that you haven't gotten with God and made sure. You know how you can make sure? Just pray about it. Your memory will take you back. Holy Spirit's in there. Holy Spirit will bring memories back to you. Yes, you are. You don't need to fear that.
True.
But you know, it's the journey along the way that you can fear. And that's what these folks are doing. I never went to war. I can tell you what, my dad made sure I couldn't get in. And my brother either one, because he had been. World War II and Korea after that, and as a Marine, and he didn't want his boys going. And I'm glad I didn't go. I wish I had served, but I'm glad I didn't go. I don't have those bad memories. But I would have been in fear. I know I would have been in fear with bullets flying around and people. So fear is a normal thing. But what this caused is rebellion. They rebelled against the clear, precise instructions of God Almighty. The people that He had done so much with, right? These are the redeemed people, pretty much fresh out of slavery, right? They saw everything, all the miracles and so on and so forth. And so we see the reaction may be understandable. It might be the norm for people. And it may be part of our lives. We may have this thing in us about, I'm so afraid of what would happen if I, jumped in with both feet, like I talked about this morning, really just gave myself over to prayer and seeking God's face every day that I live, every day He gives me. If I would start to knock on my neighbor's door and say, I love you, brother, I love you, I really want you to think about your soul. What would happen if I did that? God's clear command is, you will be witnesses unto me. What would happen, though? Fear can cause us to rebel.
True.
When we see in the Word of God pray without ceasing. What's the matter with us? Well, we don't pray about much of nothing some days. I don't know. Do you pray in public over your meal? You should. You're witnessing to your Savior, your Lord and Master. Thank you. You provided this for me. Is that a true statement?
Right.
Yeah, it's a true statement. But we see the fear. Let's not let that cause, because I'm going to tell you something. God will give you strength to do everything. Pastor talked about this morning. Everything that He's called you to do. He'll give you the way, the will, the strength, the ability, everything. Didn't say it'd be easy, but He'll give that. He'll give that to you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like these folks have been promised. I'll fight for you. I'll be in front of you. You don't need to worry. I'm going to chase them out of there. Don't worry about anything. Just follow my instruction. It's yours. It's yours for good. You'll never have it taken away. Clear instructions. Clear. It's all on me, God says. Yet they fear because man has said something. Right? Man has said something. Verse 5 through 9. The next section is answering the fear. This is answering the fear. We just read about the fear. We said that maybe we have fear, and we do have fear even as Christians. Part of our Christian life ought to be conquering that fear through the Lord. Okay. Verse 5 through 9, we have answering the fear. Then Moses and Aaron, after they've said, let's get us a new captain, go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of children of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. So they fall on these four men, they fall on their faces. They rent their clothes. They're just in super distress. They've gotten to the end of their journey. The promised land, right? But these people don't want to go. Verse 7, and they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then He will bring us into this land and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. And look at, here's that word, only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. In other words, we're going to consume them. Yes, you get the picture of that, right? Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. So there's the answer. The answer comes from the men who believe God. The reason for their belief is this. There's no defense that they have against us. The Lord is with us. If He delights in us, all of this is going to come true. It is what He promised us. There it is. He'll fight the battles for us. So they've repeated what they've already been told. This is it. And God has got, and this is His promise, right? Had He failed on His promises to these people when they were in slavery in Egypt? No. Do you remember? Moses went back, and right at first they didn't really know what to make of Moses, right? But then they started seeing the miracles, seeing the things that were happening, knowing that God was in charge, and God made Moses a special person there in front of the man of God before the people. And He put His hand on Moses. Didn't He choose Moses? Out of everyone He could have chosen, that's who He chose. And He made Him known to all the Jews as the man of God. And they would go to Moses for all these things. And so they're reminding them. And again, they've already been told these things, and now they're being reminded. That's as in answer to their fear. Listen, God's promises are an answer to our fear. Right? Some of you know this so much better than I do. You've been through so much more than I have in your life, and you've found God to be wholly true, didn't you?
Right.
That there was nothing that fell short in God.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you just trusted Him, you just went on. I think of Terry, I just glanced at him, Terry and Evelyn there as they go to see Phyllis. And we have a lady that's saved, not just saved, but saved out of what she was in, right? Why? The Word of God. He just shared the Word of God in food. Right?
Right.
But isn't that the promise of God? You shared, and great things happened to these people. They're saved out of the stuff they were in. Somebody asked me about that this morning, or mentioned it, and I was saved out of the muck and the mire. Where were you? Same place.
Right.
We were sinking, and we had no hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we were a sailor lost at sea, and no life thingy, what you call those things, life preservers, right? But God rescued us out of there, and the answer is this: trust in the Lord. They verified when they spoke to the people. Joshua and Caleb were doing the talking. They verified all that God had promised. As one spies out his life. Let's spy out your own life. These were spies. Right? Some of them came back with bad news, some of them with a good report. But as you spy out your life in Christ, are we able to say this? Because I think this is what's being said by Caleb and Joshua. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord. How long? Forever. What is he? What would be as we're looking? Look at your life. Are you depending more and more upon your Savior? Right? We've got Him as the way. We found the way, right? He found us and put us in the way. He's the way. Do we know all the truth that's there? Are we searching for it? That's important. All the life, all that He has to offer us in life, in eternal life, eternity with Him and the eternal Father, the one that's always been the self-existent God, will be with forever, right? Have we, when we search our own life, can we see this? Like Joshua and Caleb's answer was, this is what God's done. This is what He's promised. That's it. They could have written this verse that I think David wrote that. Isn't it Psalm 23? Part of it. David actually wrote the psalm, but isn't that the whole point of being a Christian? Is looking back and say, I tested Him. I tried Him. He tested me and tried me, but I went right back and say, God, you said, and I'm taking you up on it. Think about that. He said, you will be a new creature, yes?
Right.
All things new. He said you'd be in His family. You would inherit. You're a brother to Jesus Christ Himself, right? Have you taken Him up on that blessed place, that awesome place that He's put you just because He loves you? Yes? That's testing Him and trying Him. Well, He puts things there in our way. These guys are looking at a war. I don't want to go. And so they forget God's promise. And Caleb and Joshua said, no, here's the promise. How then do we fight fear that we may have about what's going on in our lives day to day? A loved one, yourself, family, somebody, the fear that goes along with just living. How do you fight it? God says. That's the answer. God says. He's already said, right? God says. And He gives us a perfect answer. A perfect answer. Look at here in the verse, just a second. Look at verse 9 again. Only rebel ye not against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land. Why? Because the Lord is with us. See, the answer is one thing. It's the Lord. What has He said? What is He doing? What has He done? Is the Lord with you on the hospital bed when you just... Yeah, right? He's with you on the mountain peak too, right? In your peak of health, when you can do all those things that young people can still do, right? doggone it, I was there, Mom. So you. Let's continue on. Fear can cause that disobedience. Fear can cause that disobedience, and they're cautioning them. You're rebelling. And I want to say this one more time with this. I already said it. Say it one more time. But when we do not the things that God has promised in His Word, we're rebelling.
Right.
You're rebellious, and I'm a rebellious child. Part of our life as a Christian is to get over that rebellion. How do you do it? You get closer to God. You just believe Him. Just believe Him, right? That's what we do. We live according to what He says. I think of the verse, it's in Hebrews, don't turn to it, it's in Hebrews 13, it says, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. You call on that promise in the hard times. How about in the times when you want to witness? As we talk about Phyllis being witnessed to, do you call on that in your mind as Lord's going to do this work? Before I came again today during the week, and really last week, because there was a chance that we would have this message last week, but the business meeting went a long time. But I prayed about it, Lord, when I brought it in today, I prayed at the altar with this. I just said, Lord, you make this special because it's not of Alan. If you came for Alan, you came for the wrong person. It's for God. We should, what does God say?
Right.
He's got all the answers. He has the only way.
Right.
All the wisdom. Think about those things, right? And so we come and get stirred up in the house of God and let His Word stir you up.
Right.
We ought to be stirred up. Get closer, right? Peter says it a couple of times in his, I want to stir you up. You already know this, he says, but I want to stir you up. I want you to remember. I want you to remember. Look at verse 10 and follow. No, just verse 10. Just one verse this time. So we continue on. We have Caleb and Joshua saying, don't rebel, don't fear God. He's the answer. Then verse 10. But all the congregation bade stone them with stones. Man, they get madder. They didn't get settled down with the truth at all. And next sentence, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. So we have now two of them on the ground, two of them with their garments rent, begging the people, do not rebel, we're here. Don't you remember what God said? And we see these folks, let's kill them. 650,000 adult males, I think that's right, that came out of Egypt. By the way, 650 adult males would die in the 40 years wandering, right? And you know the number that went in when they got back to Jericho, when they crossed and attacked Jericho? When they went into the Promised Land finally, 40 years later, it was about exactly the same number. All that death in the desert and all that birth in the desert took place. And God had His way, didn't He? God had His way. I'll just replace you. You don't want to go, I'll just replace you. And I can. God would say. So we see that they're going to stone them with stones. But the part that I like is this, the second sentence, and the glory of the Lord appeared. Just at the right time now. These are dead men. They're not going to go, and they're not going to let anybody force them to go into the Promised Land. They're not going to go fight. They've proven it. Let's get another leader. And then when they try to talk them down and trust in the Lord, we're going to kill you. We're going to kill you. And the glory of the Lord just at the right time. And I think that's important to us. God's timing is perfect just like He is. There's a lot we could say on this, but just short with won't say a lot about it, but just this, we need to learn how to wait on the Lord. That does not mean that we don't pray, and we don't study, and we don't do the things that He's asked us to do. But sometimes we're not willing to wait on His glory, right? We're not willing to wait until He is there with what we're going to do. Even at work, and I know everybody here is so old. Does anybody here still work? Oh yeah, John. John's still a baby.
A teenager.
Yeah, I know. I should have thought about that. Aren't you even supposed to work according to the glory of God? Aren't you supposed to rejoice in everything? Aren't we just supposed to have God up there in front of us? Or isn't that supposed to be our leading in all that we do, right? That's what it's supposed to be. And we see the glory of the Lord. He appeared just in the nick of time. And I think of the stoning. Isn't that the world's answer to our faith? They can't understand it, so they say, kill them. Or maybe not that, kill them off. Prevent them from reading the Bible at school, praying in school, and having the manger scenes out at Christmas in public places. And now the attacks are getting even worse, where the churches are going to be jumping through hoops, getting raided, going to have pastors arrested, probably, eventually. Why? It's killing them. It's stoning them. Let's stone. I don't like what they're saying, man. Kill them. How in the world can the world believe this, that I say I believe what God says about that? That's a hate crime. I just committed a hate crime. That's what the law is. What is it doing? It's killing it. Chasing you underground, closing the door, or getting people to go to a place. Pastor talked about this morning too, that doesn't preach the truth. Just some of it. And twist that. Omits much, right? The little soft sell, let's just have fun today. And let's have tea right afterwards, right? That's, as long as everyone's happy. As long as everyone's happy. We ought to be happy in the Lord and unhappy with us.
That's right.
But listen, there's much to do with the time God gave you and me from the moment you were saved.
Right.
And we've wasted much time.
True.
Let that get a hold of your heart, because it's a true statement for all of us. I won't speak for our pastor, but it's a true statement probably for him too. We waste much time. So kill him. Can't understand this, so let's kill him. God is listening though. How do you know God's listening? Because He appears in the nick of time. Doesn't that give you a real good feeling knowing that God's watching over this thing the whole time?
That's right.
He hadn't said anything yet. He brought him to the promised land, just like He said He was going to do. Right? Go ahead and send those spies in there. They're going to see I wasn't lying to you. So the spies go, right? He's watching though, and he's listening, and he's seeing. And if He was doing it then, what about your life and mine? Doesn't that give you comfort?
That's right.
Right.
And shouldn't it also give you pause sometimes about what we're doing when we don't think anyone's looking? Because we get into some stuff, right? Just being nothing for the Lord is stuff. We ought to never be nothing for the Lord. Look at what He paid for us.
Right.
We ought to be awesome for the Lord and in the Lord. I think that's what we ought to do. God listens. He watches. He knows what's going on. And here in that verse, you can see in verse 10, He intervenes and He rescues. So He wins. Where God is, where He appeared, He was victorious once more. We've been talking about this in Sunday school now for a while. He's always victorious, right? If He's in it, you can't lose. Think about that in our life. If He's in it, you can't lose. So what's the deal then? Then go to Him in all things. abundance. Thank you, Lord, for the abundance. Thank you for the house I got. Man, it is cold today. I'm thankful I've got heat. There are people without the food, and without the heat, without the shelter, without the food, the abundance of things that we have. Thank you, Lord. Well, you put me in a nation where all of my life I've been free to worship you. There aren't many countries that can say that. They got hundreds of years now of freedom of worship guaranteed in law. So we should go to him. Look, if you would, in verse 11. And we said, let's stone them with stones, because we don't like what they say. The Lord appears and he rescues them. He's been watching, he's been viewing, listening. And again, he's victorious. They are not stoned. He's rescued them out of there, even without a prayer. Notice that. God, look at the blessings of God. Just thought about that, you know. They didn't ask for him to rescue them. The Bible doesn't record it. But he was watchful over who he wanted to be watchful over, right? Okay. Then verse 11, we have this. And the Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people provoke me? How long will it be ere they believe me? For all the signs which I have showed among them. Wow, what a question, huh? Because he asked about the Jews, and you know the stuff that they were a witness to. How long ere they believe me for all the signs I have showed among them? This is God saying, as we've been again talking about it in Sunday school hour in the mornings, as God reveals himself through his works. He's not something we have to wonder about, right? Now you think about it, if you had an idol, and you had that idol, as the Bible says, you get a piece of wood that you didn't burn, and you get it shaped and then give it to a master metal smith or something, and he'll cover that with some sort of metal. And you put that thing up on your mantle. Now that God, that false God, that idol, you can make anything you want it to make, right? Because it can't speak, can't move, can't hear, can't do anything, right? So you just make of that idol whatever you want it to be. And when you see somebody else with this, one of those kind of idols, you can say, well, what does he do? You'd be left wondering, right? You don't know it. What does your piece of wood do?
Yeah.
This is what my piece of wood does for me. What does your piece of wood do? But with God, God has showed us who he is. He showed these people. Look in the verse again. How long will they provoke me? How long will it be ere they believe me for all the signs which I've shown among them? I've showed them I'm able to deliver. Isn't that a song? He's able. Yes. I know you don't want me to sing the rest of that. I didn't either. I've revealed myself to this people. I have taught them. When you think about the power, my power, I've showed them my power in the plagues back in Egypt. The Red Sea parting, the Red Sea destroying the army of the Pharaoh. The death. That when I wanted a death, they died. Yes? The enemies that were in your way, they died. Death, I controlled that. I decided the Pharaoh's army, they would die when they followed you. That was my decision. And I've showed you that. I'm capable of that. I can do that. Listen, why is that important? They're going to fight a war. Is God able to bring death to the enemy? Yes. He's telling them that. One of the things. How about this? My voice. I showed you myself in my voice. Had they heard his voice? Yeah, they had heard his voice. Remember in the cloud? And the lightning is going through it, and they're scared to death. But Moses goes on up there. And he goes back up there at different times also. And he would meet with God. We say face to face, but he never saw God. He saw his hindermost parts at one time. But he never saw God face to face because he died, right? But he saw the glory of God and the appearance of God. And they heard his voice on the mount. in the cloud. You remember the cloud that had, the fire that they had? They saw God's work, His voice, and again, His presence. How about the water from the rock? Did they see that? Yeah, they were thirsty. I don't even know if you add the men to the women and the children, how many people came out of Egypt, but it was probably over 1 million people came out of Egypt. They had to drink. That water that came out of the rock satisfied them. How much water came out of that rock, right? And that was the only water that they had. And I showed you that, and I fed you with manna. So listen, they knew Him. They knew God. They knew His work, knew Him from His works. It was from His works. I'm going to turn to a place. You don't need to. I'll tell you where it is if you want to turn there, but you don't need to because we're coming right back. But there's one place I want to turn here. It's Deuteronomy 4:32. I'm going to read a couple of verses. This is Deuteronomy. A lot of Deuteronomy is a repeat of what is in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. It's written again and more details about things that God has done and what He expects when they go into the Promised Land. Because right after this, they're going to go in the Promised Land, right? Joshua comes next, right? So they've come back to the Jordan. Deuteronomy, as they sit there and rest, they're in camp. Moses wrote Deuteronomy. And again, so that they would have it in front of them. These are the people who've been wandering as young people. They've gotten into adulthood and they had their own kids that are now young kids, and they're going to go over and possess it. So He's going to go over all these things. And so that's what we're seeing here. So let's read here. Chapter 4, verse 32 and following. He says, "For ask now of the days that are past, which were before thee, since the day that God created man upon the earth." Now read along carefully. "And ask from one side of heaven unto the other, whether there has been any such thing as this great thing is, or hath been heard like it. Did ever people hear the voice of God speaking out of the midst of the fire, as thou hast heard, and lived? Or hath God essayed to go and take him a nation from the midst of another nation, by temptations, by signs, by wonders, and by war, and by a mighty hand, and by a stretched out arm, and by great terrors, according to all that the Lord your God did for you in Egypt, before your eyes? Unto thee it was showed that thou mightest know that the Lord, He is God. There is none else beside Him." And there's more there. But I want you to see the triumph that's in that, in those statements. And He's telling these people, the Jews, all of these things went in, and they went on for this, so that you would know God. And He worked through these miracles, right? And He worked through these signs and the power, and so that you would know that God is the Lord. He is the Lord, right? And so we see that is illustration of what we're talking about here. How long, back in our verse 11 of Numbers, and we say, how long before they believe me for all the signs I have shown among them? Because I've shown them many. He's shown His sovereignty. He said, I will do that. And did He do it? He did it. That's sovereignty. That's when He says it, it's as good as done. Period. And He showed them all of these things. The voice, the power, the revelation of Himself, the ability to kill and to show His presence in the water and the manna, all of these things. The escape from Egypt. And some 1,500 years later, what did He do about 1,500 years later? This same God would manifest Himself. How? In Jesus Christ our Lord. He would manifest Himself in Jesus Christ our Lord. He would, and this is a quote, "The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached unto them." It was God come in a body, and that was his proof. All of these are miracles. You heard the list, right? This is the list he sent to John Baptist. When John Baptist was in prison, and he said, "Are you the one that should come?" And Jesus said, "Tell him this. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached unto them." What proof did he give? The things that I do are of God. They are of God. I am God. He says, I am, right? That's who he is. Jesus. And listen, why does God do what he's doing here? Not to just reveal himself to the Jews, but to you and I. We should know things about God from what he does in Scripture. We've been talking about this one incident. These 4 men are going to get killed. And here's God. They ain't going to get, there's no chance in this world, if God's not for it, that it's going to happen. They are not killed. He's watching every event. Do you know something about God now for you? Yes. Because God's watching you in your life and what you're doing. Do you want, he knows what you really want.
Right.
Do you want more of him? He knows it.
Right.
Oh, yeah. He's waiting on you. Tell him. Tell him every day. Tell him every day, I want you to use me more.
Right.
Hold on, though, because he's going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to do it. I believe that. Do you believe that, Pastor?
That's right, absolutely.
If he gave you his son, why would he withhold anything else you ask?
That's right.
Right? That's Scripture. That's Scripture. I didn't invent that. I'm not that smart. That's Bible. He gave his only begotten Son. He'll give you all things that please him, according to his will, right? So you just go to him and you ask him, and we see, yet there is still unbelief. So we see the unbelief with the Jews ready to take over the promised land. Though they knew all these things about God, still there's unbelief. They don't want to act according to God's direction. And though Jesus came, were there unbelievers when Jesus came? As Pastor said this morning, they killed him. Just like these guys wanted to kill Caleb and Joshua and Aaron and Moses. They killed the Savior. There was unbelief, yet they knew all these things, yet there's still unbelief. Let me find my place, folks. I think I'm down here somewhere. Here's it for you and me. Let's apply this to us. I've been doing that a long way, but let's do this a little bit, and then we'll get to the last verse. We only got one more verse. It's not verse 12, so don't even look there. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Okay, listen. Yet there is still unbelief, and I have a question first here. How long? That's what God just asked, isn't it? How long won't they believe me? How long? We're saved. How long won't before we just throw in with him? And you say, how do you do this? Is that a one-time? It isn't a one-time nothing. It's a life.
Right.
Day after day dedicated to him.
That's right. That's right.
You sin, you get right now. Yes. You ask him to point things out to you. You ask him for help. You ask him for that power. Lord, I know you're listening. I want more. You saved me from more than this, Lord. I don't want to just sit on this stool and do nothing. Use me. We too, now this is for us, we too have seen miracles. We have seen miracles in our life. I made some lists, and you could add to this. How about this one? This is the first one that came to my mind. Lives transformed into a life that pleases him. That's what happened when you got saved. You have the only opportunity anybody in the world, billions of people, only the saved, can lead a life that pleases God.
That's right.
Now listen, that's a miracle. What were you before you were saved? You think about where you'd be. I don't know what you were into. I can judge by myself. And I already said I was in the muck and mire. And you probably were too in some ways. But the whole thing comes back to this is all on Him, all because of Him, I was transformed, and so are you, into someone that can please God Almighty, the Creator God, right? We can please Him. That's a miracle. That's a miracle. Think of it. You've heard of criminals, bad criminals. They get converted sometimes in jail. They end up being preachers. And thousands are saved. Newton.
John Newton.
What's the name of that? Amazing Grace. Was a drunk sailor.
Slave trader.
Slave trade, yeah. That's even worse. And look at how God changed it. It wasn't just salvation. It was a change. Have you got enough change? Ask. Seek it. Seek what He has for you. How? Tell Him. What do you have? I repent of it every day. What I've done that's wrong. Lord, what do you have me to do? Here's the vessel you cleaned up. God, use it.
That's right.
You didn't clean me up just to sit, do something with me. So we have the miracles. And listen, He alone provides the faith necessary to please Him. Yes? For by grace are you saved through faith. That not of yourself, it's a gift of God. The faith necessary for you and my salvation, He gave you that too. All sufficient God, right? It all comes from Him. He gave you the faith necessary. He gave you a light for the path you're walking on. Pastor, talk about path. What path you're on this morning? He gave you a light for your path and my path. There's a light there if we use it. We can walk in the light as He is in the light. Yes? That requires close to God. Closeness to God. He gives us that light. He gives us wisdom for life. And He gives us strength to continue on in His way. He gives us these things. And those are miracles. Every one of those miracles. Why do I say that? Not one of us deserve anything that I just said.
Right.
It's all because of His love. It's all because of His love. That's one. Another miracle. We have seen illness, which strengthened, maybe not in ourselves, but in loved ones, maybe in ourselves. Illness which strengthened, fortified, nurtured, and matured our faith. Why is faith important? Because without faith, it's what?
Impossible to please Him.
It's impossible to please Him. And so what does He do? He puts things in our life that come into our lives, and instead of reacting in fear, we go to Him and we say, Lord, I can't do it, but You can. Lord, You do for me. You do for, I don't deserve it, Lord, You do for me. And our faith grows and it matures. We become more like His Son. We grow into someone different. That person, that being that can please Him. And sometimes He'll use an illness. An illness. There could be tragedy. Other miracles. A tragedy to family or loved one. And it brought more love for God. Why? In your sorrow, you turned to God because you couldn't get out of your sorrow without God. A loved one had passed on. And I'm not trying to be morbid. Some of you have gone through that. A parent has died, or a child, just a good friend, mom, whatever. And to get out of that darkness, you went to God. You went to God, and you got out of that darkness. And what happened when you got out of that darkness is you love Him more. Why? Because He got you through something more. Right. You knew His love from a different perspective now. There's a different, wow, man, I've talked about how He can do that, but now I see. Job,
That's right.
I've said it all my life, but man, He just worked in my life now. And I see Him. He's real. He's real So we've seen these, there's been miracles. There's been miracles. And God's concern is that I show you the miracles, but you don't change. You don't believe me. Let's not be one of that group. Last verse, and this is where we got the title. The title is, All the Earth Shall Be Filled. So let's drop down. We're just going to skip some things that are going on here to get to the crux of the matter. Verse 21. God says, first of all, God pardons them. He gives these people a pardon. Did you know that? He was going to kill them. Was he? He said, let me kill them, Moses, and we'll just start all over. They don't believe me. And Moses, and they prayed to God and said, you need to spare these folks. You need to spare them. And God said, all right, I'll pardon these. I'll pardon them. That's in verse 20. The Lord said, I have pardoned according to the word. And then verse 21, but as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. And I just like that verse. I just like that verse. I don't know if I can do much with it other than just read it. But I've got some notes. So let me do my notes here. First of all, he says, as truly as I live. He's swearing by who? Himself. And there's a verse in the Bible somewhere, I think it's in Psalm, but it's also, again, it's either in Romans or Hebrews, and he says, because he could swear by no greater, he swore by himself. In other words, on himself. In other words, I am the great guarantee, right? I never fail, and I'm going to swear by the great, me. Right? God saying it's not me. He says he can swear by no greater, so he swears by himself. And we see something here. We see a power and a sovereignty. Again, we mentioned those things earlier. But we see in the things that he's saying here, there's an omnipotence, all power, omnipotence, right? And there's a sovereignty. I will do as I will do. That's what God does, right? And I'll swear by myself. Why am I saying that? Look at the whole verse. He's swearing by himself, as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with my glory. And this is in response to what? The unbelief of the people who have seen. The unbelief of the people that have seen. So what else can we get out of this? Once the world and all creation was pristine when it was first created, right? There were no mistakes. God's creation was perfect in every instance. Every animal, every plant, human beings, all in perfect accord. There was no curse. There was no sin, right? None of that was going on. So it was a pristine creation, and it was filled with his glory. Yes? It was filled with his glory. There was nothing to dim his glory. There was no darkness at all. Right? It was just God and his glory and his creation, and it was glorious. And at one time, that's all of creation, and the earth was like that. It was all filled at that time with his glory. And I want you to think about this verse now. This is way beyond Eden with the sin. And man born into depravity and sin and into Satan's kingdom, way past that. And we see him saying there in verse 21, all the earth will be filled with my glory. Oh, in other words, he's promising something. It's going to be back to what I always intended. And I swear by myself, that is what's going to happen. Jews, though you don't believe me, and you will not go in and let me fight your battles, and though you threaten to stone my leaders, my chosen men of God, though you've threatened that, and you won't go to war, though you've seen all my miracles, you will not prevent me from doing exactly what I intend to do. I will restore all things. Is that a fair statement? Is that God's plan? He restores us when we're saved. We haven't finished our restoration yet. What's our final step of restoration? You're looking what's the final step? What happens? What's left? In a moment.
Or plunge under the bottle or the heaven.
And what happens to us then?
Transformation.
Transformation,
Yeah,
John.
yeah. We
Transformation.
use this.
He said
Yes,
transformation.
absolutely. The transfer. Our bodies are transformed like unto His glorious body. Yes. So there's all restored, complete. Our soul has been restored in salvation. Our bodies, though still sinful, that will go away for every one of us also. The earth, the curse will be removed from the earth. There'll be a new heaven and a new earth. Listen, all the things built up by Satan's direction in his design, all of the earth, and makes it just, all of this is just so awesome. The buildings and the roads and the this and the that, and everything that's not godly is going to be burnt. Yes. All of it. Everything that can burn will burn. And that's going to be most everything that mankind has made. And so we see in this statement that though you will not prevent me, he's saying to these folks, you will not prevent me. And I don't want us to think about there's no glory now. Is there a glory of God still? Yes. I want you to think about His goodness. Isn't that part of His glory? God's goodness. Doesn't it fall on the sinners as well as the saints? His goodness? I mean, aren't there some pretty nasty people that live the high life right now? That's God's goodness that they're still even here. Right? And the rain falls on the just and the unjust. Right? God's goodness is still there. In Romans, we see a verse that says this: the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. And what this is saying is the creation knows all about God. And if you were to look at creation, there has to be a God to explain it. There has to be. The scientists have never come up with anything, and they won't, that explains creation apart from God. And God's guiding hand in all that we are, as far as our genetic makeup and so on and so forth. So God's glory does remain. But the sentence says this: it will be all filled. We see this. All the earth shall be filled. And I want you to think about that. There will be nowhere that His glory is not. What a different place that will be. Think about that. A restored earth. There will be no place that's not filled with the glory of God. None of the darkness, the evil, the lying, the cheating, the thievery, the pornography, the murders, the rapes, name it, the disbelief. There will be no place where His glory does not fill. I'm reminded of in Isaiah 6 when he saw God high and lifted up, right? And he said that God's train filled the temple, right? And there's another place where they're dedicating the temple of God that Solomon built, and they had to leave the temple when God arrived because His glory filled the temple, and there was no place for them. No place for them, just the glory of God. The glory of God will return. And He says this: it will be the mantle over everything, and in everything will be my glory. It will all be to my glory. No matter what you do, that's where I go. That's sovereignty, folks. That's a purpose. We already knew about that. We already knew His purpose, right? We got saved. Why? Because He wanted to restore us. But He's saying it's not just the salvation, folks. In your life, should be filled with my glory. Yes? We just sang about that. When people see us, they'll see God in us. One of the 3 hymns that we sang. And that's his plan. That's what will be carried out. In context, he had pardoned them, but his plan, which is a restoration to glory, will not be deterred. The earth will be filled with my will, my way, my purity, my righteousness, my mercy, my grace, my light, my peace, my order, and my judgment. He would say, I am the author and perfecter of all these. I am the God of holiness. All this different, set aside and perfect is in me. That's what it will be like when he restores all. So what's our place then? Believe him for what he's done in your life and go forward. Show his glory in your life. Lord, we thank you for your words and your promises that we can count on. Thank you, Lord, for miracles in our life. I ask you, Lord, that we dwell on these things day by day by day. We would dwell on you and your Son, the power that's available to us through you and the plan you have intended for us that's perfect, but without any flaw. And Lord, the end that's already decided, Lord, and so glorious it'll be. And we just thank you for it. We praise you. Help us, Lord, to get more and more and